Jubb's Little Red Book, Volume 1, Eye Awareness. Glossary. Definition of working term. Accessing cue is a sensory motor movement, triggers an anchored state. A circle of power is what's below consciousness, as is your executive inner guidance. Alm is an international unit of exchange representing an amount of $26. Such a currency is a medium of exchange of a fixed value in perpetuity, as has intrinsic value of opportunity as an hour of work done in a JC quanta. Such an alm is tied to government of a verified vote. Amnesia, not able to remember. Analog sculpting applies nonverbal placement of things. Anchored state. A sensory motor trigger elicits a specific state of being from an accessing cue. Association. Using the vestibular submodality of direction and spatial orientation for subject as your state you're in, being toward your outcome. Such an outcome is within. Awareness. The body is perceiving as moving. Calorie restriction. Reduce all calorie to only felt necessity. Catalepsy. A state of fixed inability to move. CB Cowell is public enemy number 1, a foreign corporation outside we the people of a communistic plan applying criminal banking cartel of the one world order, has owned all the nations up to this point under a communist agenda to remove all natural right, while operates by embeds called senior executive servants with plans to fund, to promulgate the removal of natural rights of we the people for CB Cowell's own profit. The discussion 100 years ago of a CB Cowell agent could net a profit back then equal to a science fiction writer. You as I give up our biological property to CB Cowell under Vice Admiralty law. To track, tag, as ID, we the people to be under ancient unethical pledge. To compel all to give an appearance, to give living substance to fiction under Vice Admiralty. To submit to CB Cowell's communist agenda as a secured chargeback by applying CB Cowell's script to a work or earn or a living, to be merely a number as a corporation as chattel as CB Cowell property under the law of merchant, Colombia. To have drafted to perform, to give substance to fiction, you unwillingly deliver a bill of loading to CB Cowell, public enemy number 1. To bankrupt all to insolvent slavery. To be costed in the form of a benefit given only existed as a privilege duty to responsibility, for a whole nation would have become helpless where C.B. Cowell has preoccupied the president of its dummy corpse. C.B. Cowell courts are under Vice Admiralty, including We the People, into fiction instead of substance, in a background in which all substance is removed. So there is no way to pay a bill. One would only be able to pay a debt at this point. Charge is to pose a burden of obligation against a property in matters of common law. Clan Lodge is made about 5 feet high, as is cambered toward the center, for it fits over 50 beloved. Sing to learn in a ceremony is about around a pit, which holds over 80 igneous rocks, as in a sweat lodge. Typically 4 rounds exist relating to the medicine wheel of the clan. Claim is a remedy of a verified fact of a harm, injury, cost, or damage to a natural right is to be made whole via such remedy. Common law is the law of nature, which equals familiar custom universally by a social compact, internally dictated from logic for reason alone, as is a just consideration of agreeableness. Room is. Such a system exists to describe sovereignty. Communication is response given back of agreement between beloved. Complaint, based upon fiction of presupposition, is the room of what is accepted where no verified fact is to support such. Congruency, as a parallel processing existed, observing what has come before and afterward, being parallel to this moment. The moment is congruent and going from one submodality to another in a paralleled processing. Consent, a concurrence of will to be volunteered to the proposition of another. Consciousness, sensation to motor movement. Corporate law is relating to chattel as an incorporation, as a corpse, all being underneath the state of a woe man, as is not of a natural right. It is not it. It is a subject, it is fictional, as is a property of a state of woe man, as state of supreme being, to be an honor, to complete trust, as in benefit to all, we the people. Counterclaim is of harm, injury, cost, or damage having arisen out of a subject matter of an opponent's apparent claim. Credit is given to a beloved to obtain goods as service within a time, to a favorable opinion, was held as to sovereignty as liability, as relates to a time allowed one given goods as service by a creditor, to their debt is of right to fulfill obligation, as to be of right to contract as any currency worth can be due. Desire, to wish, want, like, for material without control. Devotion, attention to focus while being in service. Devotional activities, attention to serve the happy face, to eclipse into a new mindset. Devotional service, serving this happy face. Discharge is to release, to be unencumbered in the law of contract where rescission is had. Dissociation is the use of submodality of the vestibular sense in spatial orientation and direction taken that is outside and away from. Dollar, is a unit of currency employed by C.B. Cowell, which is equivalent to a score kept in a temple of moaning, where the word money comes from. .alm is a server, as a public ledger, is a common trust, all in equity, is, by verified decentralized vote, as is a new mindset in government, all is governed by a smart contract. Dreaming, a state between sleep to wakefulness. Dreamcatcher, a symbol, medicine item drawing all good to you while you sleep. Eclestics is the epistemology of spiritual maximum all law is derived from, as is derived itself from natural law of custom. Equity is justice as a remedy to make whole where a harm, injury, or damage occurred. Exceptional brain function is noted as the left parietal lobe of the brain is observed still as both left and also the right anterior frontal temporal lobe. Exempt is a discharge of a charge to a certain relief to a property of reliability. Fiction, an imagined condition differing essentially as real. First attention is a limited state of channel available in direct associated recall, shaping consciousness via your random phoneme generator, skimming from those channels noted, which is only 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of observed information at any one moment. All else is below pattern recognition. Formlessness is equal to power, you footing where none generally tread. Framework for behavior change. An inductive structure for change. Future pace, anchored state to a future moment, such becomes triggered. Government, control of the mind. Government is only formed to protect private property. Is the social compact as a state underneath a species of woman, as a clerical or as could be a civic form of government under democracy. To uphold an apparent right, true governments are decentralized by a verified vote from a net as .alm to a currency called the alm is tied to governance. So obviously we know the bank is inside the people. Who pays the piper runs the show. A C.B. Cowell created currency of collateral in exchange of a note equivalent to a promise to pay by we the people. You are made to believe we the people are bankrupt, as we the people are outside the nation as a service provider. All that is constantly created is causing inflation. Government, God, Allah, Buddha, Krishna, Yahweh. Government means mind control. God as religion, as a civic or clerical form, as, if not then, a civic form, instead under C.B. Cowell, where his submission is to some authority, as a subject for some sake of certainty. Re means property of the bank. Lie means fiction. To GION means region. All five major religion having been under CB Cowo is in fact a corporation converting we the people into a mere subject as a customer. We the people proceed with such correcting of such a genocide of regress, all from wrong committed, while as such government would have continued to have been destructive. You, as I, institute a new social compact as a republic at peace. For the next 200 years, so, no longer all would have remained in a negative, economic, industrial, warmongered manner. Organizing, safety is happiness by positive economic inductance. Change is your whole life improves, for nothing is to hinder or to be a nuisance to any individual. You as I visit to inspect to correct irregularity. To stop all corporation have been of fraudulent, dishonored, lawful international electronic transfer of currency of account, which once as for all time is an electronic transfer governance is by decentralized verified vote with .alm as a server as a common trust. Meanwhile, the ownership of the media is decentralized because it has become the most centralized ownership in the free world. Regulatory agencies can't have any swinging door anymore with business, nor any double-faced ghosts as oath taking, except to we the people who's in government. Grace is a favor, indulgence, as distinguished from a natural right. Grand unified totality is a quanta of a magnet on building block. Hollow bones is an empty center with care wrapped around. I awareness is a state of being as 50% being empty as stellar space, as the other 50% as matter is care. It's a perfected state of detachment as liberty of self in a spontaneous intelligence, determined path of least resistance, via an absence of restraint, opposite of a state of peony. I awareness is half empty as the other half is care as matter, as an I awareness beyond perception. Illusion, what is not absolute, as of a tendency to fade away. Immoral contract is of substance contrary to public policy, as is null as void. Impersonal, universal, public objective. Induction, a maximization of receptivity. Intimacy, a state of being as no boundary is existed. Intelligence is to go beyond any as all fixed patterns of response, to have learned how to survive. For one's ability to discern information, experience, to apply wisdom in whole brain functioning, to associate congruency, to integration in wholeness of life, such is the ability you and I have to have gone beyond any prefixed pattern, to have responded to your surviving. Integration. Pleasure and interest cause whole brain functioning. Aversion as a state causes you not to be able to get into your frontal cortex or use your left hemisphere. No action can exist because the front is not connected to the back of the brain to have any faculty to inspire a spontaneous creative intelligence, in having had an influence. Future. Pleasure and interest cause the midbrain to be connected to your frontal cortex, such via the left hemisphere connects nerve to action. Interest and pleasure is the primary factor behind the nervous system remaining in a totality, in a full potential of a possibility of becoming. JC quantum. The mass length as time is measured of a residuum left over after 2 light wave is phase conjugated as a solid state colloid making up the vacuum. KAV. Kinesthetic auditory visual. Kinesthetic self. A catch-all phrase including all senses other than auditory. Also visual to chunks of sensory information at any one feeling of time. Life food is low phosphate, high calcium, plant-based food with a value to enzymatic activity is monosaturated fat, while preparation making nutrient easier to digest. Limited mind function would have involved the aversive componentry of the brain, would have neurologically inhibited the frontal cortex, is left hemisphere inhibiting sequenced motor movement as limiting the behavior to have been disassociated, fragmented, as simultaneously as sequentially incongruent. License to lie through the senses. A contracted privilege to a licentious act where none ordinarily could perform a certain act, offering a certain licentious act to be performed. Love, a polar completeness as a union agreement is with what is dichotomous, a state of being without any walls, this as a vacuum we fall into as affection. Lust is passion for a material world. Masked, a beloved student of eye awareness. Medicine bag, a symbol medicine hem you have all needed inside. Meditation, to make still, silent, as transparent the mind. Meta responding is agreeing to a continuing to be able to exit, yet isn't an exit or complete behavioral response, yet simply allowing what is existing in the response not to be, and exit point to make a complete behavioral response, which a proper behavioral response exists because of 4 pieces necessary in well-formedness, which has a test phase, it has an operational phase, and has a test phase. To exit such in whole brain functioning is called a tote. Studying behavior, you need to be able to see each piece as a chunk. So meta-responding is called going over something, yet without any exit from that subject. So it is not a response, which is a polarization to the step previous, nor is it an exiting from the subject as an opposite or forward point. Mission, a stated objective, is in the support of service to the greater good of we the people. Modeling, learning through active imitation. Moral, an aggregate of principles related to beneficial conduct conforming to sovereign right, wrong, in dealing with each other in a social compact. Motivation is about one set of need which has within such being internally generated, as another set of needs exist which is called hygiene, which has an external generativeness to have caused a movement only. So, in other words, some syntax of behavior is generated inside as is without any built-in escalating zero, meaning you will participate in this day in and day out, versus another set of need being externally driven while having had a built-in escalating zero, meaning what satisfies you today isn't going to satisfy you tomorrow. For instance, as an internal generator is existing, the locus of control is from within. 4 areas of behavior satisfy being motivational need, for instance, like learning, growing, having recognition as acknowledgement. All is of an internal generation, where another set of need also exists, which is hygiene need. For instance, shelter, food, friends, status, all cause movement to be attracted towards something or to have moved away by operant conditioning. New quantum age, based in an actual quanta as not simply a theory, but a grand unified totality in magnicity called GUT. Omnipresent, above, beyond as thought. Operant conditioning, pleasure, also pain, driven, swimming to the bank of desire, then also fear. Other than conscious mind, all channels below your random phoneme generator. Ownership is the title to property of a right of a thing of belonging to the exclusion of others in society. Perfect detachment, I-awareness, compassionate, to not be controlled by the mind. Permanent is what is following an arrow of time in physics, which is a cause to effect to be of a rational continuism. Personal, individual, private, subjective experience as a state of being. Persona is a mask an actor wears as a fictional entity, as a recorded rank held, as an office held inside a fictional entity of a de jure government, as a corporation, only having a duty, responsibility as privilege. C.B. Cowell has used force to we the people to place all underneath the state in credit office of a person, individual. You, as I, are not a party to a social compact set up to disguise, to defraud the masses, to handle over a title of substance to a pledge of slavery by having allowed to institute a chargeback for managing currency of account. Also, currency of exchange as a fiat paper currency given a servant slave by a centralized, non-sovereign C.B. Cowell service provider. You as I had been underneath a ruthless communistic system outlawed forever. All of the world beloved had been stripped of any semblance of a natural right. C.B. Cowell had by theft owned a security interest for using we the people created currency to all have been converted in exchange for worthless debt instrument. Peter principle is as one, C.B. Cowell has promoted self to an utter incompetence. Play. All activity as a state of mind is existing, which is beyond ordinary time. Policy is a general principle to guide, to manage public affairs as a lawful sovereign good. Positive economic inductance, resource state driven from currency being asset-backed as we the people determined as each individual collectively is the owner of this bank, as is of a verified vote is alming what is positive about the overall book individually as collectively. An alm is of value which is in perpetuity as is of intrinsic value. Quorum sensing is the whole group functioning together, communicating together as a whole community. So the community has the capacity to respond with informed consent. All causes the whole to function. Random phoneme generator is made from neurology engaged in sensing a threshold of information from 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information as sensory channel is coming through as felt, heard, seen of your sensory motor complex. While skimming from such channel below a certain threshold is what consciousness is. For this is shaping to be modifying behavioral syntax within first attention. A function of having a channel is amplified enough to reach a certain threshold. Such information modifies noted observed behavior, is skimmed from to shape behavior, verbal, also nonverbal information. Real. What is permanent is as absolute, is not subject to change as I is. Religion. Submission to authority for the sake of certainty. Republic at peace is the rap as currency is made of a value in perpetuity of intrinsic value equal to an hour of work done in a JC quantum, being created asset-backed, tied to a verified vote in a decentralized system in governance, where the alm as currency is created by positive inductance. We the people all own together. All corporations have to have a mission statement of the support for natural right given. All, again, is able to settle a verified claim under the rule of law. Only a living being is given an account. A corporation is relegated to be as a fiction. All charges discharged to republic this debt. No monopolies allowed. All news is independent, not owned by C.B. Cowell. All public officers show a security, liberty, interest in due diligence shown with limits of discretion based upon upholding a vision of natural right. All disclosure and conduct of official misconduct, indiscretion is now protected. No secrecy is allowed, for the public is in charge of speech. Religious also health choice is left to one's own executive guardianship, as is one's own natural right. All living being is to assist we the people all over the four corners of the earth. All living being who is real is above any fiction in standing. All one's own corpse without need of a license. All charges are revenue back to the public under a common trust called .alm. No swinging door or any double oath-taking is allowed. All can have only one master. All is worthy of hire. You can only join like with like. All is to be integrated back into nature. Government is only formed to protect your private property. All are paid for the next 100 years to compensate for harm, injury, damage, and cost, so all are made whole again. All is by a common law court of record, trial by jury process. No conflicted interest can be in serving we the people. Room is defined as having ethic. This is the greatest room, which is this room for improvement. Savage is an original who can get most everything done with a stick. One who is not domesticated has a lot of wilderness still inside. Scalar wave is a longitudinal wave as a B-field effect. Such is associating to every point in space superluminally. Such scalar wave travels 10,000 times faster than light, transcending time and space. Such waves cause coherent order in water, for resonance is in a relative parallel direction, such wave will travel past straight through the earth without touching anything, without any loss of strength. Such wave can have a tensor, which is pushing and pulling back as x trajectory going into space, while torsion involves space being the x trajectory receptor. In a state of receptivity to torsion and tensor longitudinal scalar wave, where the x trajectory goes out into space and meets space y and z, occurs as a receptiveness to wave off the trajectory of superposition. Secured party creditor, as we the people as the creditor, who is of the reversionary interest, is the authorized representative of the attorney of fact of ens legis, fictional name. Selective restrictive violation, an ordinary omission of logic in the verbal, as also nonverbal response, which was engaged in a polarization, also meta-responded being a preferred mode of sorting information, which the territory distinction has not been looked at. Also, such has not been satisfied of any inclusiveness, nor what is presented was of any well-formed constructiveness. An unconscious omission of ordinary logic, also fundamental lack of choice, poor use of the vestibular modality, and not being outcome-oriented or congruent, integrated, or associated. In a superconscious state, such patterns applied purposefully, versus a beloved's response only to have been without usual flow happening. A trauma reenactment syndrome generally would have been existing for inferential reason, being observed as fallacious, where straw man, slippery slope, ad hoc, and circular reasoning was being used, which is called Dunning-Kruger. Mostly, all was Pavlovian conditioned by a surrogate spouse relatedness. Engaging in emotional incest where a parent had need not met by a spouse in a healthy manner is instead got by getting that need met. Such need met was transferred to the child to obviously be of a condition impossible to be equal to a parent's immaturity, causing the child to be in a state of hardwiredness of disappointment, while identity is confused with behavior, and such is called an enmeshed relator. Stress that was existed at home caused this beloved to leave things at the last moment to do, so learning in school becomes to be under stress, while afterward memory retrieval becomes state-specific. Many patterns exist because of generalization, deletion, and distortion. This work can assist you find relief by being able to look at the structure of behavior. Sequential incongruence. What's before or after the moment isn't in parallel process. Simultaneous incongruency. Channel is applied at the same moment, incompatible with each other. Sleep. The mind is turned off. Smudging. Using sound, smoke, as steam by heat transfer energy so you cleanse the auric field from the feet up. Somnambulism, a state of motionlessness. Sovereign is the common law custom of being self-regulated. Spiritual being, in a state of perfect detachment. State is a useful inferior contrivance of I, woman, deriving out of a native dignity from an arrived import to a political state, as the state is a fiction subordinate to an individual, as we the people in subject. For creatures such as a state as a fiction many times over had been put above who was living, as the living was with what was a subject, merely as all dead fictional things were all listed together. By such a system was used to deceive, for we the people were to have been vilified, to have been oppressed by the master who was the maker of such state, only being relegated as a subject before this new mindset was finally expressed by the use of private sovereign law. Statesman. The mendicant assists with the fallen on both sides, as causes the mind to fall more quiet. 1. Diligent in personal discretion, in speech as conduct, to uphold a vision of natural right for the greater good of all. Sovereignty is defined as being self-determined, self-regulated, as is the custom of we the people born of natural right. Sovereignty is the state of woman who is the subject of fact. All other state is inferior as subservient to this subject of fact. Superconscious, beloved, is an eye-aware soul who has mastery of the sensory motor complex, who is applying skillfully the vestibular sense to have caused a mind to have fallen quiet. Superposition is as any A field trajectory moves from point A to point B in the process, the A field trajectory as X is being absorbed by the B field permittivity, which is Y plus Z. As Y plus Z is the sum as scalar wave, as the static B field permittivity is absorbed of the A field X trajectory, as they are arriving at this absorption point, Y and Z. Each superimposes on the other. Scalar wave is a B field response to an A field trajectory. This response is some 10,000 times faster than light. This phenomenon is corresponding to the A field X trajectory, and Y and Z added the wave observed is a phased conjugation of such individual wave as amplitude added, so waves can either arrive in similar point in phase to a constructive interference, for the interference of the wave is twice the amplitude of what existed, yet all is excerpted by the B field, that where the scalar force is, it has so. In example, if disturbance was in opposite direction, superposition has a way more of being a destructive interference. Superposition is the B field magnetic response to the A field trajectory made. Supreme consciousness is having exceptional brain function by mastery of the sensory motor complex. While use of submodality to cause an enriched, more total life in direction get carried out, one who is eye-aware, who is all-knowing, who is a living example, your meditation is total. This is of you whole self to be personal as private to your individual subjective sensed self inside. This is you in the most developed sense of eye-awareness. Sweat lodge is where glowing hot rocks are brought from an outside ceremonial fire into an igloo shaped as sometimes ovoid cambered flat top enclosure covered with blankets to a tarp. Water is applied over the hot rocks in the center of the covered lodge. Sweet grass, cedar, tobacco, as sage as osha root vapor is mixed with sound, song, drumming is applied as steam is used inside, as radiant wet heat steam, as large leaf brushes is used to do smudging. Such a process is applied as one will typically undergo 4 rounds of 15 minutes each, relate to the medicine wheel. Transcendental is an omnipresent state allowing for clarity and change work as a reframing condition. The fruit of life is the 13 bodies, all else then springs from. The path of least resistance is as water finds its own level as the path of what's mutually beneficial. True healing therapeutic equals changing your way, as is a behavior changed as a result of instruction followed after having received a healing therapeutic. Transient is a tendency to disappear as a dream, not being permanent as merely a sensation, while interpretation to be fiction as a thought is as a reflection in a mirror of yourself. The path of least resistance is as water finds its own level to the path of what's mutually beneficial. The vestibular sense, the first sense to form on earth to mediate the tonus sense through the otolith saccule, also semicircular canal. Submodality of the vestibular sense include direction, turning, acceleration, deceleration, whole body spatial orientation, as also locus of control. Words predicating the vestibular system provide a substantial relation as a presupposition between the noun to the verb. Vestibular predicate include in, on, up, down, forward, back, turning, inside, outside, spinning as the suspension of time. Tonus, a static to dynamic magnicity of the body. Transient is a tendency to disappear as a dream, not being permanent, to merely as a sensation, while interpretation to be fiction as a thought is as a reflection in a mirror of yourself. True healing therapeutic equals changing your ways to follow instructions afterwards is engaging behavior having been changed. Truth is this which is mutually beneficial. Ultimate knowledge, superconscious being, is mastering the use of submodalities of the sensory motor complex. Unilateral contract is about some favorite one-sided, distinct right of action given, for is unconnected with any other distinct right of action. Urine therapy, use of your own use to assist with long life. Whole brain functioning, WBF, physical, psych, leadership, direction, strategy, ecologically sustainable, internal determined interest, as well as pleasure. Stimulate whole brain functioning and cause neural integration, whereas aversion is mediated via a limited mind function. Worship, model as have devotion as give service. Yawipi is a healing ceremony of intention done in the dark inside, as a healing ceremony where the medicine beloved creates a seemingly state of sufferedness to cause all participant to come into a state by being brought into more the quick of timeless now, where light flooded now into a past, darkened areas in your way of life, all grows in the dark side of life as roots do of what's planted. Yoga, to yoke or join together, the same as having a spiritual life. The body is the mind's experience of itself, so while you are flexible, as have strength, as endurance, you have a fit sense of self. A mind remains flexible as you persevere, having persistence as straight. This little red book is about who you are. This room is for who, also what is real. You take personal responsibility for the genesis of peace. In a new mindset, room is to learn how to discharge the debt while you forgive, for this is the sake of a happy face. As even another one forgiving, your heart remains tender to all beloved. This you is kind. As room is in nature, as a stone may raise a child to a superconscious state, as none can find a parent interior of self, this you is a child of the universe. No less than stellar space in the body, this is your own spontaneous creative intelligence, which is the primary perception, where the purpose of your life is to be in an unbroken pursuit of happiness. For space is to be in your heavenly abode with warmth emitted from blood, which is such an endeavor. Can You have made room for the greatest room as the overall room for improvement.